It's 3 o'clock and we want to welcome you all to this webinar for Swegon Air Academy. And my name is Norén-Lundh and I will moderate this session. This webinar is arranged by Swegon Air Academy, which is the neutral platform where we want to share objective knowledge about other things, HVAC, but also about sustainability, finance, and energy efficiency, of course. Mm-hmm. And we do that on by sharing case studies on our website, Swegonairacademy.com, and we also do it through these webinars, of course. And on our website, you can find all the webinars we have arranged throughout the year about indoor environmental quality and also about health and the biathlon. How important is it for your health to have a good and healthy indoor environment when you exercise and train?
Yep.
And we also write some articles and insights, and we also publish some books as well. But today's webinar will be about Lifecycle assessment, LCA, and it also will be about environmental product declarations. And everything from the point of view what possibilities from a HVAC installation and lighting perspective. Because today we have the honor of having two supplier companies with us that will talk us through how they have worked with EPD and LCA and the process within their companies, of course. And these two persons are Mirko Sauvan, who is the sustainability manager for Swegon Group. Swegon Group is the market leader when it comes to supplying indoor environmental solutions within ventilation, cooling, heating, and climatization. Swegon has 20 production plants all over the world and about 2,700 people employed in 16 markets. And also via link, we have Fransson, who is the Chief Sustainability Officer for Fagerhult Group, which manufactures advanced lighting solutions, and both for professional indoor environment and also for the outdoor environment. And you have around 4,000 employees all over the world in about 28 countries. So warm welcome to you guys. And it will be interesting to hear a little bit how you have worked with LCA and EPD and what challenges you have had and what possibilities you also have seen when working in this process.
All right.
Yeah, so I leave the word to Mirko here, who will introduce himself.
Yes, thank you, Åsa. It's a pleasure to be here. It's my first time on Swegon Air Academy. I'm very excited talking about this topic. How about you, Anders?
Of course, I can only agree on that. Very, going to be a lot of fun to discuss it with you, Mirko.
Yeah, thanks. Well, dear audience, you have heard a little bit about us, but we also would like to get to know you a little bit. And for that, we will use Menti, which is a service that you can interact with an audience. And for those who have not yet used Menti before, please take your mobile device and scan the QR code that you see on your screen. Or if you use a web browser, use the web URL that you're seeing and enter the code. So please, everyone, join our service here, Menti. We see that people are coming in and joining. You need this service for interaction throughout the entire session, so we can interact with you a little bit easier in this digital format, or hybrid, if you want to say so.
So do you recommend I keep it open in the web browser or similar during the session?
Yes, yeah. It would be great if you just keep it open, because I will refer to it now at the beginning and later on in the session. So I give you a few moments to connect. It shouldn't be that difficult. We probably have some people joining minute by minute, but we probably start in a few seconds. Let me see, we have already people joining. I see hearts are going out, which is great. I give you a few more seconds, dear audience. It's obviously not mandatory to participate, but whoever wants is happily invited to. All right, I think we can get going with that. And the first question is relatively easy. To what, sorry, that is the right question here. To what customer group do you belong? So are you rather a property owner? Are you an installer? Are you a specifier? Are you an LCA professional or any other group? Please click the relevant button on your device. All right.
So consultants, specifiers,
Yes.
and other.
All right.
And
interesting.
Yeah.
Okay, we have quite a few consultants and we have some installers and even manufacturers. Well, happy to have you here, and lots of others that I couldn't name. All right, but if we go on, how experienced do you think you are with EPDs? Well, do you have rather none as just another three-letter abbreviation? You think you have maybe a decent overall understanding, or do you rather consider yourself at the top of the topic and be an LCA or EPD expert? Would be interesting to know for us, so we can adapt a little bit throughout the webinar to our audience today. So please just click what is relevant for you. And I see that we have the majority considering themselves not to be the extremely highly sophisticated experts, but we have some, which is great that we can even attract these people with the topic. All right, that looks nice. Thank you very much. I will then start a little bit our presentation. Anders and I will comment the content a little bit, and you will have the chance to ask questions at the end of our presentation. I would like to start with our brief agenda. We will show some of the basics according to the topic of EPDs, what they are. Then we will focus a little bit more on what is actually the interesting parts, the industry context and its significance. And we will finish on the benefits to EPDs and the link to customers, but also to manufacturers.
And Mirko, we would like to say that you can't write questions in the chat, but in the Q&A, that's where you can write questions. And then we try to put those questions to Anders and Mirko at the very end of this webinar.
All right. Okay. Yeah, that's valid, the function, so we don't miss your questions. If we then start off with the relatively basic, easy start, what is an EPD? Well, 3 letters at the beginning, but the mean environmental product declaration and nothing else. You can consider it as a technical document defined by ISO standards. And they illustrate and show the environmental impacts of a product or a service over its entire life cycle. And that is usually based on a method called lifecycle assessment. And for those who have not really a clue what lifecycle assessment is, it's a scientific method in order to quantify environmental impacts. And the life cycle usually looks on a very easy level like this, that you have raw material extraction, then you manufacture the upstream components or materials. In the case of a building in our industry, you manufacture the building before you enter the use phase. And at the end of life, you hopefully have a very high degree of parts that you can recycle and nothing goes to disposal. That is life cycle assessment in a very nutshell. But how do you come from a life cycle assessment to an EPD? Well, EPD creation usually is a chain of different steps and processes. And most likely you will start with selecting certain product category rules, or PCRs, that are hopefully specific to your product that you have. So you apply the same rules when you conduct your life cycle assessment. But then already at the next stage, you need to conduct the entire LCA life cycle assessment, and that is usually done by the producer, by the manufacturer. And that process is relatively time and cost intensive. When you have done that, you transfer your results into the EPD format that is usually defined by ISO standards, but also a little bit by the EPD platform that you are using, before you then come to the stage that you get a verification by a third party. And that body basically checks if you have used all the rules accordingly, the standards, and that you have conducted your life cycle assessment in the right manner. And you start that and you finish that process with registering the EPD on the platform that you choose and publish it. And the last two steps are a little bit smaller in terms of time and cost investment. But Anders, how do you see about the cost distribution here? Do you agree on that? What is your experience, Anders?
No, but what I can say is I fully agree. I think overall, I think the entire process of creating EPDs is very costly. And I think the cost split that you present here are probably very relevant. Also, I think what makes the cost on our end higher is when using external consultants also to make the EPDs, as it is not a very easy task. It requires some competence to be able actually to do the LCA, that is the basic for the EPD. So what we are doing right now in some of the brands is that we're looking at recruiting our own employees for this to actually insource this competence in the group instead. And mainly, of course, it is to reduce the cost, but also to gain our own competence and learn more of this. And some of our brands are already or have already done this. So we are having some internal resources on this, and some are considering doing it. And also, we have 12 lighting brands in the Fagerhult group, and they are, of course, on different places when it comes to EPDs, mainly depending on the maturity in their respective markets. So in some cases, it's not required.
Do you experience it to be easy to find competence for internalizing that process, or at least parts of the process, since not everything can be internalized as of now?
No, I should say that it's difficult. We have to develop and train them ourselves, and they stepwise learn how to do it. So I should say that it's very difficult actually to find competence in this area. All
right. Okay. Well, yeah, that is probably, at least also from my point of view, true for Swegon, the company I work at, and when I talk to other companies, they have the same experience. It's a competence that you don't find quite often, which makes it even more expensive and difficult to find. So just very few basics on EPDs. So because most of it you can read relatively easy, but the fun stuff to discuss is obviously industry context and significance of EPDs. And starting off, many of our companies in the building industry, but in many industries, experience sustainability performance becomes more of a competitive factor, also around environmental impact. And in the building industry, we see a strong need for high-performing buildings with good indoor climates. And at the same time, we need to achieve low or obviously naturally zero operating or embodied carbon impacts. And unfortunately, in many industries, you have a lack of credible and reliable communication around the environmental performances. And that is very much true in the HVAC industry. And from what I've learned about the lighting industry, it is partly true. Anders, you can comment that in a moment. But these lacking insights of environmental impacts might create a disadvantage in developing circular or other environmentally friendly solutions. So that is the key, that you don't go by gut feeling, that you have a process that delivers hard effects. And at last, in terms of significance for our industry, is that green building certifications become more and more common. And they even set high requirements on HVAC solutions, but also lighting solution in terms of indoor environmental quality, IEQ, and environmental impact. So Anders, how about the lighting industry? Is it common to have EPDs and communication around environmental performances, and how reliable are they?
First of all, I think most of what you said here on this slide, I think it's similar in both industries. I mean, we are supplying different but components to similar industries, or the building industry. To comment a little bit on the first point you said, I think sustainability, of course, I mean, it is providing competitive edge for sure. And I think the importance will increase even further. This is taken more seriously. And I mean, not only in the business environment, this will be a competitive edge. Also, when it comes to attract new competence and resources. In the recruitment processes that we see, sustainability often comes up as an important parameter when choosing your future employer. Otherwise, what I should say or comment when it comes to EPDs, like I said before here, when looking at our brands, but also related to the different markets and how mature the markets are, it varies a lot. One of our larger brands in the outdoor lighting segment or application area, they have come the furthest. They have maybe, I think, 50 EPDs or something like that, because you need one per kind of product family. And just to mention, when we look at one of our larger brands, that alone could have like 1 or 2 or even 300 product families. And then to relate that back to what we discussed before, that it's costly, you can just imagine to go through that process with LCAs and EPDs on all those product families. It is costly, but our target and aim is that in a couple of years, we should have EPDs on all our new developed product families. That's our target.
Yeah, and that obviously, I mean, if the significance wouldn't be there in the market and the demand of customers, you would have difficulties to defend these kind of investment and recruitments and for these costs. So there is a strong signals that companies like ours experience and our industries.
Yeah, for sure. And just to take an example on EPDs, in some projects that we're in, it's the entry into the project will be, maybe not today, but tomorrow will be to have an EPD. Otherwise, you're not even in the quotation process.
Yeah. All right. If we go on to see why EPDs have a quite strong focus, and that is partly because of a shifting focus towards embodied carbon. An EPD basically discloses the environmental impacts of materials in that sense. And why is that relevant? So traditionally, and even true today, operating carbon comes from the energy used, usually in the use phase. But when we look at trends and developments like sustainability awareness and demand of customers, when we see energy efficiency legislation and transition towards fossil-free and renewable energy, and even resource scarcity and waste regulations, then we see that the use phase will be more renewable and more fossil-free. What does that lead to? Well, the growing importance then of embodied carbon that is in the materials will increase, since the carbon footprint of the use phase and the energy consumed becomes less. So in case of 100% new renewable and fossil-free energy in the use phase, what is left? Well, it's the materials, meaning the embodied carbon. So that from a logical point of view. And if we look at the focus more in a EPD life cycle, where this is separated in different modules: product stage, construction, and use stage and end of life. We see the traditional focus was here, and the future and growing focus becomes more at the end of life and at the starting stage, the product stage. And that means basically the meaning of embodied carbon will increase, and to some extent, at least in a small process, the operational carbon will decrease. Anders, do you agree on that? Do you experience a different picture in the lighting industry?
What I can say, I can explain it like this, that what we have done for this year, earlier this year, we concluded a large project to map our carbon emissions, embodied carbon and so on, for all our 12 brands. And still, the use phase is dominant. Kind of like it varies a bit depending on where the brand is delivering its products. Yeah. So it can vary from kind of 50 to over 90%, and that's exactly what like you show here, Mirko, that it's depending on how far the specific country has come with their electricity grid, how renewable the electricity is. So the brand that is having kind of 50% in our case, they are delivering the majority to the Nordic countries.
All right.
Of course. So from our point of view, still, we will continue our work with creating more energy efficient solutions with sensors and connectivity, because we still believe it will take some time, because we deliver to many countries. It will still take some time until we're there. But if we exclude that and look at the embodied carbon in raw material and components, it's just below 10% for us. But when we then exclude the use phase, we are around 70%. So an important part still for our emissions is to work on that and reduce. Yeah. So what we have done, I could give some examples if you want, Mirko, what we have done.
Maybe one example would be great for the audience to understand what you mean.
So what we do is that when we look, for instance, at the material, we are discovering and exploring different materials that we could use, for instance, instead of metal. So we have recycled cardboard, actually, which means that we are instead of having the luminaire body in metal, we are using it in cardboard. Others we use plastics that are based on renewable raw materials instead of fossil oil, which means that we're using two ways there. We're using pine oil or frying oil. Both there are residual products or components or rest material from the forest industry or the restaurant industry.
Okay.
So it's many different perspectives that we look at. But what we also do, and that goes for
in many cases, when you use biomaterial, is that the products also get lighter, which is of course also good. When we need to use still metal, of course, we try to use recycled metal. And in some cases, it's not possible. And then we focus on what we call lightweighting, which is then a requirement in the product development process, which actually means what it says, focusing on reducing the light by using less material. And of course, by that, I mean, we also reduce the embodied carbon in the products. Finally, worth to mention also, and that is maybe related to the end part of the life cycle, and maybe not on the material as such. There we instead have focused on different business models and how to use those to be more circular in our approach. So what we do there, a little bit depending on the different brands, we call it a little bit different, but it's more or less the same. So what we do is that we offer our partners and customers to keep the luminary body, for instance, the metal parts in it, and also the gables and so on. When they upgrade, when they want a more energy efficient solution, which means that we upgrade the light engine, but we keep the rest. So we avoid to produce and buy new raw material. We just upgrade the light engine. So which means that at the end of the day, our customers could keep the luminaire, but get more energy efficient light engines and energy use. So we have done a couple of those projects on site, and we have even made such renovation projects at customers where competitor brands are used. So it's a way for us to actually take our responsibility for the entire lighting industry.
Thank you, Anders. What you describe, you basically have already developed strategies with these kind of insights that you have gained from this kind of work. And that is probably a natural consequence of adapting to the new environment and the developments that I have started to outline. But when we go on here, we see also that these kind of insights come into science, and even in the HVAC industry, you look at embodied carbon. He have an example recently published in 2022 by scientists at the Chalmers University in Gothenburg. They looked at an office building in Switzerland and a new build, and they have looked at only the HVAC categories and the embodied carbon of them. And they found out that mechanical equipment and ducts and pipes have a quite strong impact. Probably no surprise to many in the industry, but it's good to have this kind of insight. And if you want to go further looking and finding hotspots, well, you might find that your product have a smaller or a rather larger impact. And in this case here, they have identified that air handling units and hybrid ceiling panels have over 80% of the impact for HVAC solutions in that category. And a little bit of a shorter question to the audience in that sense, more of a rhetorical question, but what do you think these countries have in common? We have Denmark, we have Finland, we have France and Sweden, we have even the Netherlands and the United Kingdom. And in the US, we have even New York and California. What would you think mentally, what have they in common? You're probably right, and you're probably familiar with that information. Well, their policies start to talk EPD, or with other words, embodied carbon. These countries have in different forms legislation and regulation around this topic. And the consequence is that EPD data, since it's the most reliable and often also the most accurate one, is preferable if you want to do business in these kind of countries. And at least I am, and I think Anders is too, that there are more countries to come to regulate these type of topics related to embodied carbon, and in that connection, EPDs. Anders, just a short comment. How do you experience the different countries? Which countries do you see at the top of this development? Maybe you name 2 or 3.
No, I think you're spot on there. I think the Nordic countries are quite far, but also from my experience in the lighting industry, also France and the UK. In some cases, also Germany actually, but more northern part of Europe, I should say.
Okay, yeah, thank you. Well, we have talked about a little bit about the significance and the industry contacts, and now we want to, at the end of our presentation, focus a little bit on the benefits from a customer point of view, but also from a manufacturer point of view. And I would like to start with a practical example with these 2 quotes. Our entire value chain will be climate neutral by 2030. And we only use renewable, recycled, and reused materials in our construction projects. These are 2 sustainability goals of a relatively large and famous player in the real estate industry. You probably know all of that. It is Vasakronan. It's a very large real estate agent in Sweden, but also globally. Having this kind of sustainability goal. You might wonder how this relates to EPDs or embodied carbon. Well, for that to understand, you need a little bit of knowledge about how companies disclose their carbon footprint according to the greenhouse gas protocol. And in short, they have 2 aspects called scope 1 and 2. It's basically their direct and indirect emissions from purchased energy, and easily said, it is their own operation and their direct impact. But then there's the larger part you call scope 3. Many of you probably have heard about this term. It's all the other indirect emissions in the value chain, and you can distinguish between upstream and downstream emissions. And that is often the entire supply chain, where you have a direct or indirect impact of that. So just when you know that, and you see here on this picture the a recent carbon accounting of Vasakronan, you don't have to read the numbers. I will highlight the ones that are relevant in my example. In 2022, they had almost 50,000 tons of CO2 in their accounting, and scope 3 was about 90%. But when you look at the 90%, what is relevant there? It's 55% materials and 14% waste. In other words, this is embodied carbon, if you want to say so. And if you want to calculate and set goals on this, you want to measure relatively accurate. And if I would be Vasakronan, I would have a strong interest in using EPDs and quantifying my scope 3 impacts. And the other 31% that you see is electricity of tenants. So it's the use phase of the installations and products that are in the buildings. Going over to customer benefits, we would start that with EPDs, you gain an improved decision-making for environmentally friendly products. You get an easier way of quantifying environmental impacts like the carbon footprint. There are also others that are stated in EPDs, but this one is the most popular. And even with the rise and the continuing popularity of green building certification schemes, they start to incorporate extra credits, and you have the potential with EPDs to gain extra credits, depending on the scheme and how mature they are related to embodied carbon. You also get the benefit that EPDs, so environmental impacts, are third-party verified. So it's not just a claim by a manufacturer or another entity. And in that case, what you also get with an EPD is this is real factory data in many cases, and the specific suppliers that have delivered and contributed to this product or component that you have an EPD for, whenever this is available, obviously. So, and these results that come out of life cycle assessments and the EPDs, they are scientifically sound, factual, and unbiased. And if you are Vasakronan or a similar actor, you can translate that to many actors that are doing carbon accounting. You can improve your scope 3 emissions. And we want to conclude with a few benefits also for manufacturers like us. You get a competitive advantage, as Anders has mentioned before. It's also true for Swegon through differentiation. It's not a hygiene factor as of yet that you have EPDs for your products. So you have a possibility. With all these insights about environmental impacts, your R&D departments and product development departments also get a better opportunity to design better products and service. And these insights enable you to have a continuous improvement in your own operations, but also in your supply chain. And very often you see a very strong sign that releasing EPDs in a transparent way, they are publicly available. You see a strong sign for sustainability engagement. Anders, have I missed something here? Benefits for manufacturers?
No, I mean, I think you cover it good. If I should say just something on these slides here that to reflect a bit on, and it's a little bit more on a general level, and that is actually that sustainability is not only about energy efficiency and embodied carbon and so on. It's actually also about the more social side of it, the people side of it, meaning well-being. And in our case, I mean, of course, energy efficient solutions that are sustainable is very, very important. But also key is to provide in the lighting industry the right light, and that is a lighting solution that makes people feel good and healthy and safe. That is also important, not to be forgotten. And I think it goes also for you, Mirko, and your industry, but maybe not with light then.
No, that's true. Obviously, providing the right indoor environmental quality. Yeah. For us, it's a no-brainer. Not for everyone, we understand that, but we try to make them understand and help them why this is important, obviously, and also incorporating environmental impact.
Exactly. So I think that was a very good summary from you, Anders, also. But Mirko, if we should summarize, what is the key points that you want to send with the listeners to this webinar today?
Yes, thank you. Well, I would like to highlight that there are many strong arguments to demand EPDs in your building or in your renovation project. I mean, if you look at renovation projects, all the entire new materials that are causing emissions are usually there. So what is left when you renovate a project in many cases? Well, it is lighting and it's HVAC. So the embodied carbon of these products have a high significance. Product-specific EPDs are considered to be preferable. There are also industry or generic EPDs, but they usually have worse performance, and that would lead to all the consequences that I outlined before.
Yeah.
And if you have sustainability goals related to embodied carbon and environmental impact in general, you want to probably calculate as accurate as possible. And EPDs and a life cycle assessment makes that possible. Anders, would you like to complement with one or two thoughts in the summary for our audience?
No, I think you summarized it good, and I think it's EPDs will increase the importance of EPDs and also, of course, the requirements. Although it's not legislation yet, but we don't know, it might come, that it will be a legislation. I wish that it would be a more efficient way to provide EPD, so it wouldn't be so costly. That's if I could wish something, it is actually to make it simpler and also not so costly, but still that it containing the same kind of information to be able to drive the entire industry towards a greener transition.
Yeah, and we have talked about this with the challenges. What you mentioned the cost, of course, Anders, and I guess also maybe there are some other challenges, Mirko.
Well, that topic is full of challenges, I would say, since it's not so industry standard in many cases. But before we comment on our challenges, Anders and I, we would like to hear or see your challenges. In order to do that, you hopefully still have the Menti solution open. And in case you don't, please connect or refresh your browser. If you have closed it or if you're new, please use your mobile device, use the QR code, or use your web browser and the URL that you're seeing. And we probably have people joining. I give you a few moments to join, so you get the possibility to name a few of your challenges related to this topic of EPDs and LCAs. All right. There's the question, what are your challenges that you experience? And you have 3 options. You can enter a few words and they will pop up on the screen. And we will see where the challenges are for our audience related to that. So we give our audience a few moments to enter their thoughts, and it should come up. And there's a it is updating.
Yeah.
All right. It looks like that we have many comments here. There are a few more coming in. I will just take a look at the screen. My screen has a problem. Well, there are lots of challenges, as you probably can see. It's everything from the understanding, the concept, the knowledge in the respective companies or at the customer or the manufacturer side, or at the supplier. So we are a supplier to our customers, but we are a customer to our suppliers, and we ask sort of the same questions, and question marks are shown everywhere. So there's probably a big gap of knowledge. And this is also why we have such a webinar, in order to educate a little bit and make a better understanding.
But what can you say, Mirko? We have in Swegon worked internally with resources. Has that given any benefits, or do you also see some challenges in the internal organization?
Well, they're more or less similar as out there in the market. Swegon is a large organization. The topic is relatively new. We act on different markets, and not all markets are mature. And our colleagues in the different markets, they experience different questions. You know, some customers ask very detailed questions, and some maybe are not on that level yet. But we expect it to happen. Anders, would you like to comment any of the challenges that you see from our audience?
I think it's as you said, it's a wide variation of topics, and I understand the complexity, and it is not so easy to understand. It is rather complex and complicated.
Well,
yeah, we have some questions from the listeners, and one is actually about cost. Anders, you mentioned that it is quite costly, and we have a question. I don't know if it's easy to answer, it's something you can answer or are allowed to inform about. How much does it cost to have externally evaluated EPD?
yeah, Anders, any comment?
I mean, I think, of course, it depends on which type of product we're talking about. So it depends on how much groundwork and data collection and so on it is. So I should say that a quite complex product, it can cost over 100,000 SEK easily per product family. So that's what I mean when you have a lot of product family, it is driving cost.
And you mentioned, Anders, I thought it was interesting that you're trying to recruit to insource this competence nowadays. Is it easy to get employees to want to go for this process?
I think, like we said, it's not easy to find the competence, but it was rather easy to find people that were interested in doing it and learn more about it, because there's a lot of people that is having a passion and engagement in sustainability, and this is one way to work with that and do that.
And I also have an interesting question here that also touches upon the subject of material, since we have established product portfolios in both of your companies, and you have worked with maybe the same type of material all the time. Is it also difficult to open up the vision to work with other materials, or is that something that you have considered?
Well, yes. I mean, if you start this process, you know, and you gain the insights, and there's a reason why you have worked in many cases with the same materials or very same materials or similar components, because they work, and environmental impact is a new parameter for many to consider, and let's say all the choices may not be true any longer in the future, depending when you make adjustments and new evaluations. So there are many new materials, and you want to, and that's probably one of the rather easy strategies, I would say, to find a material that has the same quality, the same characteristics, but with a lower carbon footprint. Anders, you had some examples there with paper. We have different alternatives for plastics, and even what was it more? What material?
Yeah, we have actually one that is not launched yet. It's in the pipeline. It's actually a product that with a body, the luminaire body based on hemp biocomposite with a binder of PLA from sugarcane. So it's and also we have a wooden product. So it's a lot of products with different materials. But I should say that for us working in the lighting industry, where we use very often the material to somehow guide the light and reflect light, it's not so easy to find material in some of the components like diffusers or reflector material and so on. So it's probably the body, the which is the frame or whatever. That's where it's easier. But it's a search, I should say.
Yeah. We also got a question from the audience. Who is primarily driving the embodied carbon interest in projects? Will it be legislative, economic, or social drivers that will make this a normality rather than an exception in projects?
Well, I would say carbon footprint driver probably comes from at the very top of the, let's say, value chain in the building industry. It can come from the property owner, from the investor, from the specifier, and the very top. They usually have sustainability goals that they want to achieve, and they basically translating that down the chain to manufacturers like us, installers in between, consultants in between, architects in between, and this basically gets passed down, in my understanding. So the driver, I think, comes from rather the top of the chain, and for the companies that see a possibility and take their responsibility in relation to sustainability. It can also come from the bottom, let's say from us, like manufacturers and the components. Yeah.
Anders, do you have a comment?
It's a very good and interesting question, and I think you're right, Mirko, and also I think it's for us that are manufacturers, I think it's a matter of understanding this and that it will happen. So we're proactive and taking a proactive responsibility to develop solutions that are competitive when it comes to this and when it's requested. But I think for sure, you're right there, Mirko. That's where it comes from.
All right.
Okay, so that was the questions from the audience today. And if we receive any more questions, we will also publish that on our website. And afterwards, you will receive a follow-up mail with the link to the recording and everything, so you can find the material there. And also, we would also like to introduce you to our next webinar that is on the 8th of December. There we will talk about how to lower your energy consumption and keep a healthy indoor environment at the same time. So that's also sustainability.
In my opinion, it is, yes.
But in another angle. So I would like to thank you, Anders, for joining us today via link on this very interesting topic. And maybe we'll come back to this topic further on in the beginning of next year. And Mirko, thank you very much for this presentation and preparation for this webinar.
Yeah, it was a pleasure. Thank you, Anders, for having me, having you in the presentation. And we stay in touch. Thank you, dear audience, for participating.
Yeah. And have a good evening out there.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.